Okay, we are in module 2 right now, right? So module 2 is talking about the fundamentals. Before I go into that, let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg. This is in 2018, last year. Mark Zuckerberg was having a tough time. You know, it was a bad year for Facebook. It was they had these congressional hearings in the U.S. Cambridge Analytica, the whole tide about this privacy and data. You know, it was a really bad time for Mark. It was a very challenging time for him. Okay, but despite all that negativity, okay, Facebook posted $17 billion revenue in Q4 of 2018. Right, despite all that backlash, despite everything, they grew 30% against the year before. Now, why is that so? Right, that is the question. Why is it that Facebook, despite all the issues, and advertisers still flock to Facebook? They still want to advertise on Facebook. Because the answer is because Facebook actually owns a sweet spot in this new economy, which we're going to cover. Okay, this new economy is called the attention economy. Right, we live in the attention economy right now, and attention is the new currency in 2019, in 2020. Right, it is a new currency. What can you buy with attention? Right, what can you buy? How can you use attention? Well, okay, so this is how it works. Where the money goes, okay, is where your attention flows. Let me repeat that. Where your attention flows is where the money goes. Okay, so meaning that wherever, the more time you spend on something, the more likely you are to actually put resources into it, to actually spend money on it. You know, think about your own life. Think about how your day is, how you spend your money. Okay, where you're spending the most of your time is where you tend to spend more of your money, right? So advertisers know this instinctively, and so they want to spend money on Facebook. But there is a problem. Okay, in the last 30 years, okay, the view time for ads has dropped by 80%. Yes, 80%. Okay, so you see the view time has dropped by 80%. This is a big problem. Okay, this is a big problem because advertisers are pumping money into the ads, but people are not watching them anymore. Ads are not as engaging as it used to be. Right? I remember when I was growing up, we only had 2 channels. My family is we had the 2 channels on TV, and I used to look forward to the ads. Because the ads were actually better than whatever content that was coming up. You know, so I used to actually enjoy those ads, and I used to actually say, wow, you know, and I used to even play games with ads, right? So we used to try to quickly check who would be the first ones. I used to play with my siblings. Who would be the first one to guess who was the advertiser of the ad, right? And that person won, right? So we used to create all these different things around the ads. But today, the ads are the worst thing that can happen to your day, right? You're trying to block, you've got ad blockers to block your ads, you've got remote control to switch channels, you're trying to run away from ads, right? So the way of marketing has changed, right? And we'll cover that in subsequent modules. But for now, let me just cover this, right? So number one, you've got your attention spans are down, right? So people don't have time anymore, right, to spend time on your ad, number one, or your marketing message. Number two is they don't trust you very much because of fake news, because of whatever else. So it's become really difficult. Okay, so, and why is that so? Well, here's the problem. Every single day, 100 million photos and videos uploaded on Instagram. 500 million tweets, okay, 5 billion videos, that's B, yeah, 5 billion videos watched daily on YouTube, okay. So this is the problem. The problem is that it's nothing about to do with your content. The content is your viewership, your audience attention spans, your audience engagement has been hijacked by these kinds of things, right? So let me just out of interest, right? Let me just show you. This is called Grumpy Cat. Okay, Grumpy Cat has 2 million followers, right? This is called Sam. Sam was born with 2 little spots on their on his forehead, right? Which makes it look like he's got eyebrows, right? Sam has got 250,000 followers on Instagram. 250,000, 250,000, okay? How many followers do you have on Instagram, right? So, and on and on and on, so, which I won't cover, but basically, what I'm trying to explain to you is that attention spans have plummeted in the early 90s, right? Or in 2000, Microsoft did a study, you know, and they said that the attention span for humans online is at 12 seconds, okay? In 2013, that has dropped to 8 seconds, okay? Now, the attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds, so we are actually less, you know, we are more ADD than goldfishes, right? But I dare say this 8 seconds is 2013 data, okay? In 2019, 2020, it's far less, right? So what are you doing if you're wanting to get your story, your brand, your messaging? What are you doing to get that across, right? Because the whole world is around this now thing. But let me just give you another aspect of it, right? This is the 2018 State of Attention report in the UK, right? And they found that to cope with all this information overload, people are becoming, and when I say people, I mean professionals, yeah, your worker that works in companies, professionals, right? They're becoming more selective of the content they choose, right? No surprise. But 85% of them now expect a story, right? They absolutely want some sort of narrative that goes with the content, right? And interestingly, 58% of them are becoming less distracted, right? Meaning that they have found ways to cope, and they're actually spending more time, right, on content as opposed to less time. But it must be the content that suits them, right? So think about this, right? You have no time for a YouTube video sometimes. You don't watch to the end. You skip ads, right? But you can binge watch Netflix, right? You can sit in a cinema and you can be there for an hour and a half and watch the whole movie, right? You couldn't spend 10 seconds to watch an ad, but you can spend 2 hours to watch a movie, right? So how does that work? And that's what I want to tell you, and I want to share with you today. It's about the power of storytelling, right? It's the power that storytelling has on us and how we're hardwired for it. So this module is talking about the fundamentals, right? The absolute fundamentals of stories, right? The fundamentals of how you can tell a better story. So, if you want to monetize, if you're a marketer, if you're a salesperson, if you're a business owner, you want to get the money, right, from your customers, okay? First thing you need to do is grab attention, okay? Grab attention, absolutely. But all ads do that, right? All ads are doing this right now. But they're still missing something. They're still missing one other thing, which is you need to not only grab their attention, you need to hold that attention. And this bit here, the holding of attention, is the hardest thing to do for marketers today because of all the cat videos and all the other stuff that's going on, there's an information overload, right? So at best, what ads can do is just quickly grab your attention, and then they lose it because you skip the ad and you want to go on, right? But there is a better way. There is another way. That there is a smarter, more intelligent, more focused and data-driven way that you can use to actually engage your audiences. And this is what we're going to cover, right? Before that, let me explain to you the three models that are commonly used. The first model is the academic model of communication, right? This is the stuff that you learned in school, right? So think of it as a triangle, and you're trying to get information from top to bottom, right? Now, in this particular model, right, all the gems, all the good stuff, right, is usually at the bottom of the pyramid. So meaning that you need to go through the intro, you get through the middle, and then the conclusion, right? The conclusion happens at the end. And this is what we learn in school. You know, you need to write in a way that where the conclusion is in the end, right? This is what I learned in school. But that doesn't work in today's hyper attention starved society, right? This kind of model doesn't work. People just don't, this red line, they don't just, they lose interest before you get to the end, right? So you've lost so the academic model doesn't work. So what businesses have tried to do is they've tried to flip this pyramid on its head. So basically, you have now what is called, what we call the journalism model. So the journalism model is very different. Journalism model says, put the meat right at the top, right? So for example, 58 people died in bus crash. Okay, right? 58 people died in bus crash. Straight away, you cut to the chase right there, right? The problem is that if you use this model for your marketing business or your business, whatever, you give them the facts, but you don't get the engagement long term, right? So once they got the information, it's like, oh, okay, 58 people died. Okay, I know. Okay, I'll move on, right? You still cannot hold their attention. So you can grab their attention in some way, but you still can't hold it, right? The third model, which is this circle here, is what I call the storytelling model or a story-driven model. So with a story-driven model, it's driven by the power of storytelling. It's driven by principles of storytelling, right? And a lot of it is based on emotion. So here you have the model whereby you don't go from top to bottom, you go from inside to outside, right? Because you're going through the heart of it by focusing on emotion. It's a completely different modality. It's completely different systems that you're working with when you're dealing with storytelling, because it is touching, it's going to places where others cannot go, right? With other two models cannot go. So we are hardwired for stories. That is very, very clear. We've been telling stories since the beginning of time, right? And it's only recently that storytelling, oral storytelling traditions, right, at the beginning of the printing press, has slowly died down, right? But today there's a new resurgence of this storytelling, because we are now coming in this mode of automation, with automation, robotics, with AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, right, big data, right? There's the need again to actually come up with narratives. There's the need to make sense of all of this, right? And making sense of it at scale. So storytelling is having a resurgence in this space as well, right? It's a very interesting study where they found out, in this very interesting study, they had these researchers studied this phenomenon called neural coupling. What is neural coupling? Okay, so basically what they did was they had this storyteller on one side, in one room actually, and in the next room they had the listener, right, of the story. And what they found out was, as the storyteller was telling the story, okay? The same parts of the brain that light up when the storyteller tells the story was also firing up, because they put these subjects and they put them in all this, they put all this MRI, they put them basically in an MRI machine, basically, right? So they could see how the brain was responding. And they found that as the storyteller was talking, the same parts that were lighting up in the storyteller's brain were also lighting up in the listener's brain. So it goes to say that the listener was actually experiencing in a real way exactly what the storyteller was telling, and in no other model, no other way can you get this neural coupling effect, only with storytelling, not with data, not with teaching, not with lesson plans, not with any kind of lectures or whatever. Only with stories do you get this kind of marked, pronounced the neural coupling effect. And this neural coupling, this is pure neuroscience. This is the science of how humans connect, and they connect through stories. And we'll cover much more about the science behind storytelling and how we use stories to actually make meaning and understand the world around us. So, which is basically 3 kinds of stories that we tell. Okay, the first one is the stories we tell ourselves. Okay, so we tell ourselves very many stories. This is how we make sense of things, right? And so that is our identity. So you say, okay, like my example earlier with the Coke, right? I identified myself as a Coke drinker, right? I tell myself a story about how Coke works for me, or Coke needs to be part of my life. Okay, so similarly, if you look at the stories that we tell others, okay, is the image that we want to portray, right? So on one side we have the identity, which we think we are, okay, and then we have an image that we want to portray. So this is that image, right? And then you've got, on this side here, you've got the stories that other people are telling about us when we leave the room, okay? That is our reputation, right? So you've got identity, image, and reputation, right? These are the 3 key things. But there's also one little triangle here called the shadow, right? So that is part of our identity. It's our shadow. And the shadow is sometimes the stories that we tell ourselves unconsciously and we don't even know it, right? But sometimes others can see it, right? And others will talk about it, right? So this is basically how the storytelling model works. Stories give us meaning. There's so many kinds of stories, as I mentioned to you. There's so many kinds of stories, and we're not going to get into actually how to tell a better story. This is not the purpose of this video, right? The purpose of this is to actually talk about the science behind the storytelling, the process of storytelling in a way that actually creates business results, that creates success in terms of persuading, influencing, and getting somebody to buy into your product, your service, or your idea. Okay, so I'm just going to cover very briefly some videos of some ads of HSBC. Here you have a little dog. It's identical photos of the dog, right? On one side it says companion. It could be an accessory or alarm clock, right? Here is a couple about to be married or just recently married. On one here you've got fate, fear, fairy tale, right? It's the same thing, different meaning, different perspectives, different stories that we create around it. Here, chocolate, energy, indulgence, sex, right? Decor. Here you've got just a mat, right? A little carpet. Either it's decor, souvenir, place of prayer, right? So you've got so many different things. But as I mentioned, stories are wonderful, but stories are also dangerous. Why? Because these stories people make up on their own. We are amazing at making up stories within ourselves to justify certain things, right? And so what if, so you see these tragedies, these terrorist attacks and stuff like that, you know, these people, if you look at their, sometimes if you look at their history, right, they are good people. They are never committed crimes in the past, you know. They go to their place of prayer and they pray religiously, right? They are, by all accounts, on one side, they are perfect citizens, right? But then the same people are terrorists as well, right? They commit terrorist acts. So it's very hard to understand how it is. It seems very hard to understand, but when you understand how stories work and how the story that they tell themselves, right, is the one that is making it all make sense for them, right? That's when you understand. So a terrorist, a bomb explosion, right? Same principles are working with your buyer, with your, with the people you're trying to influence. What if they are creating stories that are dangerous for you, right? What stories are they telling about you? What stories are they telling themselves about your brand, your product, right? So it's important to actually do this uncovering discovery process, right? Which I cover in the later modules. Okay, I wanted to talk to you about this very interesting study called the jury study. Okay. Now, they wanted to understand how the jury makes decisions, right? And so they did a study some years back, and they found out that how a jury actually makes the individual panel members of the jury, right? How they actually make decisions is this. They listen very carefully to the facts presented by either side. Okay, they listen very, very carefully to the prosecution and, you know, the defense, right? And after that, what they do is they take the facts from both sides and they build a story within themselves of what actually happened, right? Of the incident of what actually happened. And once they've built that story, then they will look to see whose argument is closer to the story that they have built within themselves, and they will go with that person, right? So it's not a question. It's not simply just saying, oh, I think I believe this, I believe the witness, or I didn't believe I think that person is that. It's not. It is how we have built a story within ourselves, and within this story we align then to the closer one, the one where we have the closer fit, right? So this is a very interesting study, particularly if you're trying to convince or influence someone. If you're trying to influence a jury, or if you're trying to influence a buyer or an employee or a business partner, right? A stakeholder, if you want to try to influence them, you need to understand how they are building stories within their mind, within their heart. Okay, we're going to talk about, since we're talking about the fundamentals of storytelling, I have to share with you, you know, if you look at this image, right, I don't have to put the name, okay? Immediately you know that this is Pinocchio, right? Pinocchio has been, is the most widely translated Italian book after the Bible. It's translated into 260 languages. Yes, I didn't even realize there are 260 languages, right? But it's been translated multiple times and it's been printed over and over again. And what is it about? It's about a boy, the adventures of a little boy who whose a nose grew long, right? And by a little puppet boy, right? So my point is that the last time you watched, you know the stories of Pinocchio, right? And that must have been years and years ago that you've heard this, right? You still remember it, okay? You still recognize it. If I asked you what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago, you've probably forgotten that, right? But you remember stuff that happened years and years ago, okay? Every story has a line, okay? The line is very, very important in a story. And this is now going below the story, right? It's looking at the structure of the story, looking at so it's not so much of the content, but it's the process, it's the structure, right? And this is what is interesting for us. Now, I learned about storytelling, a lot of it from this guy called Aristotle. Okay, Aristotle was this Greek philosopher and very accomplished, and he identified that there were 3 key things that every story needs to have. Right. The first one is ethos. So ethos means credibility, the credibility of the storyteller. Right? So if you're a village elder and you have experienced a lot and you tell me the story, I want to listen. But if I don't trust you, you look a bit flaky and whatever, then I don't want to know your story, right? I will not buy into your story. So the credibility of the person, the reputation of the person, the context from within that is very, very important. But that's not all, right? You need to have what is called pathos. So pathos is the emotional connection, right? So he says the emotional connection that you need to create, the emotions that you need to arouse within the person, that makes the story so important, right? And logos, it's got to be logical, right? It is not about stories can help you suspend disbelief. Yes, stories, when you say, hey, let me tell you a story, right? And people be like, oh, okay, they become very open all of a sudden. When you say, let me tell you a story, right? But you say, let me sell you something, closed, right? So that's why story and selling need to work together, right? So logos is logic, right? So the logical aspects of it, the aspects that appeal to the mind, right? So you got mind, heart, and reputation, credibility, right? That's what every story needs to have, right? Successful story. And there are 7 basic plots in every story, right? Which I will not cover right now, but there is a free download ebook that I created that actually covers the 7 basic plots. So let me just maybe give you a little overview. There are like 10, 20, 30,000 stories in the world, right? Maybe more, right? And all of these stories do have basically can be boiled down to 7 basic storylines or 7 basic plots, right? So the actual lines. So there are just 7 of them, right? And this guy did a lot of studies and basically wrote a lot of books about it, and I basically just collated that and put it into an ebook, right? So you can actually download that for me. Now, anybody watch this Coco? The last time I watched it, I cried, right? It was a really, really touching movie, and it was done by Pixar, right? Pixar has done a lot of good movies, and you wonder, why are Pixar movies so good, right? They are so good because they all follow one basic system of storytelling, and which I'll cover now, right? So let's look at the anatomy of a blockbuster right now. So here you have Cinderella. As I said, you all know Cinderella. You remember the story of Cinderella. You remember Pinocchio. You remember all these fairy tales, right? But what happened 1 week ago? What happened 3 months ago? You've forgotten already, right? Because they had no stickiness. They couldn't, you didn't take it into yourself, right? It just came on the outside, on the surface, and just got rubbed off. But it never was internalized by you, as how stories can make you feel. So let's talk about Cinderella here. If you can see, there are certain parts that are important for you to know. Number one is, you see, it never is a straight line, right? It keeps going up and down. It keeps going up and down. This is very important. Contrast. That's the first thing you need in storytelling, right? You need to have contrast. There's always contrast, right? Number two, you will see that you build up suspense here, okay? And then you've got a roller coaster thing going on, right? So you look at the sequence, it's beginning, middle, and end, okay? Three parts, sometimes four, Japanese storytelling, but generally it is got, there is a sequence. It is not, it is a linear sequence, right? So coming back to this, right? So Emma Coates was one of the first people to actually share 22 secrets of Pixar storytelling. I've put this also down in my ebook, which you can have as a free download. But basically, one of those secrets I'm going to share with you now. And it's how movies are made, right? So if you look at Finding Nemo, for example, or Finding Dory, or Toy Story, or whatever, they all follow this 6-step process, right? Which is, once upon a time there was, and then every day something happens, but then one day, which is a turning point, something happens, okay? Now, because of that thing that happened one day, something else happens, and because of that something that happened, something else happens, okay? Until finally you come to a conclusion. I know this doesn't make a lot of sense now, but let me just give you the example of Finding Nemo. Now, Finding Nemo and its precursor Finding Dory, right? Together, these two, they grossed in today's value about $1 billion US, over $1 billion US for Pixar, right? So it was very, very successful as a movie, and people have watched it multiple times, and not just kids, adults too, right? They loved it. Everyone loves it. And the story structure that makes it so engaging is actually the same thing I just explained earlier that was shared by Emma Coates from Pixar, right? Number one, once upon a time, there was a single parent fish named Marlin who was extremely protective of his only son Nemo. So here you've got this once upon a time, which is setting the stage, right? Then, number two, every day something happens, right? Every day Marlin warned Nemo of the ocean's dangers and implored him not to swim too far away, right? He said, oh, it's really dangerous, be careful. And every day, so it's already building up, something must be happening, right? The audience is understanding that it's dangerous out there, and they're hoping they can see the love of the father for the son, right? And they're identifying already with the characters, right? And then number three, one day, okay? So one day in a high emotion content, right? One day, in an act of defiance, Nemo ignores his father's warnings and swims into the open water because, he wants to be a rebel. He wants to, get away and whatever, right? So that happens, okay? Now, because of that, okay, Nemo is captured by a diver, okay? And he ends up in a fish tank of a dentist in Sydney, okay? So Nemo is already been captured, okay? Now, because of that, Marlin sets off on a journey to recover Nemo, okay? And he helps, enlisting the help of other sea creatures along the way. So now, you are already hooked. Nemo has been caught, right? And now they're on a voyage to find him. So does he find him? Does he not find him? What are the adventures along the way? This is all the interesting stuff that, you know, if you're partway in the movie, you want to get to the end, right? There's no turning back, as they say, right? So this is the kind of stuff that actually grips you further into the story. So it's not just about facts, because the facts are right there, right? The facts are right there. Marlin and Nemo find each other. That's a fact, right? If you put that at the front, right, and if you just give that to, there's no story, okay? So this is not the journalism model. This is a storytelling model where you save some stuff, the good stuff, for the end, okay? So until finally, Marlin and Nemo find each other, reunite, and learn that love depends on trust, okay? So we're going to module 3. Let's have a break.